Thank you, Bonnie and Jerry, for that beautiful Janice Stanfield song. Wow, what a morning. Here we are, meeting live stream one more time as we are continuing on with Richard Rohr's book, The Universal Christ, and our discussion of that. We are in our final week of that before our resurrection journey. So, as I do when we are live and at Unity Hall, I've been just kind of watching out there about what people are doing to practice these principles. So, last week you had these spiritual practice challenge to remind yourself that you are the body of God, you are the voice of God, you are the hands of God, you are the eyes of God, you are the ears of God, and to decide, let your wisdom guide you. How am I practicing that? So I wanted to share with you how a couple of people in our community have been practicing that, and I'm so impressed with the divine ideas that are being listened to and acted upon in our community. So very early on, our own Rita Enlow, one of our members, decided that what was hers to do as the body of God is to use her hands to create N95 face mask covers. And so Rita sent out a message to the Unity community that I wanted to read to you. It says, "It is so slow going as I polish up my sewing skills and learn my new sewing machine. I am finishing up number 20. Thanks to Shelley, my neighbor who printed the pattern for me, a family who purchased and delivered fabric and pipe cleaners, our own Mary Lee Bayswater from our community who also donated a stack of fabric and thread, and to another neighbor who became Rita's cutter. 2 days ago, I was approached by a former colleague who runs a local hospice program. Their fabric masks were stolen, so I committed to sew for them. Today, I sent them a dozen laundered face mask covers. Their team has 35 members, so 24 more to go. I am sewing with the Million Mask Challenge, so she's inviting other Unity sewers to look at the Pins and Needles website located in North Olmsted. They are the ones who created this challenge. Rita says, I feel that I am making a difference while staying at home and transforming my latent entrepreneurial talents. Blessings from Rita. So thank you, Rita, for that divine idea, for being that hand of God that has taken that on, and for saying yes to being your light, to shining your light in such a marvelous way. I also wanted to share a divine idea that was received by Denise Demet, who is also one of our congregants that attends Unity Spiritual Center, and she received the divine idea this week to be that body of God expressing by participating in the Hunger Cleveland Network food drive. So she has placed a big bin out by Unity Hall doors, and we have a no-contact drop-off point where every day people are invited to deposit their non-perishables in that box, and Denise is doing her part by picking those up every day at 5 p.m., and we are sharing that with the Cleveland Hunger Network to make sure that families who are hungry receive the food that they are needing. So thank you to Denise and Rita for listening to those divine ideas, and I invite each one of you to do the same. So today, our conversation is around the idea of the universal Christ. I am here with you. I am here with you. And so I wanted to share with you as we began a quote from the book Universal Christ by Richard Rohr, because Richard Rohr tells us in this that the general consensus for the first 1,100 years was that the sacrificial death of Jesus on the cross, the price or the ransom, was being paid not to God, but to the devil. Now imagine that. We in traditional Christianity have grown up believing that God required the sacrifice of Jesus. But for the first 1,000+ years of Christianity, that was not the prevailing thought. The prevailing thought was that Jesus was crucified to appease Satan, which obviously gave Satan a bit more power than Satan deserved. And so it came about that in the 11th century, Anselm of Canterbury wrote a paper called Cur Deus Homo, which means, why did God become human? And in this, Anselm said in effect, yes, a price did need to be paid to restore God's honor, and it needed to be paid to God the Father by one who was equally divine. So here comes a changing thought. Here comes an evolution of the idea that Jesus was crucified to appease Satan, to now Jesus was crucified because it was a requirement by God. And Richard Rohr goes on to say, unfortunately, for a simple but devastating reason, this understanding also nullifies any in-depth spiritual journey. Why would you love or trust or desire to be with such a God? So Richard is inviting us into that idea that God required Jesus to be crucified for our sins, that God would require any kind of punishment, because that, of course, is not Unity's understanding of God, but it is nonetheless still a prevailing idea of God. I've been thinking about that over the last couple of weeks as we have been dealing with this worldwide pandemic and listening to the voice that's out there that sometimes says things like, this is God's punishment to humanity because they are not following God's way. If we would all just get ourselves in alignment, this punishment could end. And so we begin to pray to this God for an end to this pandemic. We'll change our heart. We'll change our ways. And it becomes this appealing to this God outside of us, as though there is something we need to get right in order for God to stop the punishment. So Unity doesn't believe that. Unity does not teach that idea of God as this punishing God. In fact, our first principle says that God is good, that God is always present, always active, and always wanting us to experience our good. God is not a punishing God. God is a God who is here in the midst of it all with us. God is here with us, walking through this with us. And so Unity does not teach this idea. And I think about what a challenge that idea must be. Like, if I just pray the right way, God will save me from this. If I just hold the right words, God will save me from this. As I have said often in the past, taking on this way of life does not mean that we will be therefore not having challenges come to us, not having to walk through challenging times. As the Buddhists say, life is suffering. We do not deny that. There is suffering that is involved in this human experience. But what Richard Rohr invites us to, what I believe Unity invites us to, is the idea that as we walk through that suffering, God is right there supporting us through it. That this is really what the crucifix experience was here to show us. So Richard Rohr goes on to say, Jesus the Christ, in his crucifixion and resurrection, recapitulated all things in himself, everything in heaven and everything on the earth. This one verse is the summary of what Richard Rohr tells us is Franciscan Christology. Jesus agreed to carry the mystery of universal suffering, allowing it to change him, which is the true resurrection. And it is to be hoped so that we will also be changed, that we would also be freed from the endless cycle of projecting our pain elsewhere and remaining trapped inside of it. This is what Jesus is exposing and defeating on the cross. He did not come to change God's mind about us. Indeed, it did not need changing. Jesus came to change our minds about God and about ourselves and about where goodness and evil really lie. This is Holy Week. You'll recall that when Jesus came into Jerusalem on that Palm Sunday, he was met by a crowd that cheered him on, yelled Hosanna, blessings, and that by the end of the week, he was crucified. And that 3 days later, we celebrate his resurrection, everything that happened in that short week. I've been thinking about how we as humanity are walking through our own crucifixion and resurrection experience. How much has changed since March 1st when Lent began and we started this book of the Universal Christ, where we began talking about that universal Christ presence being there since creation began. It was the light that filled all creation. It seems like ages ago to me. Here we are, these 6 weeks later. And now we are each in our own isolation, in our own mystery, in our own tomb experience, not knowing what's going to happen and how long this is going to last, wondering if ourselves and our loved ones will be safe, perhaps already experiencing somebody that we've known that has been impacted or passed away from this virus that is traveling the world and really does not discriminate against anyone. So I'm seeing that we are here in this tomb together. We are here, but what the Easter story reminds us, what the crucifixion experience reminds us, what the universal Christ reminds us, is that God is also here, that power and presence that is God is also within this with us. And so that cross experience is one of both a vertical connection, connecting to God in the depths, taking the time to be still, to be aware, to know that God is here in the depths with us, to know that God is the strength uplifting us, the wisdom guiding us, the understanding supporting us, the divine ideas encouraging us, the life moving us. God is here in this vertical experience. But that it's not enough for any of us to stay here alone with God, but that we must also move it out. And that's the horizontal part of the cross. We must move out beyond just this own individual experience into the activity of our life. We must take it to our loved ones. We must take it to those we are experiencing life with, going through this with, this human experience with. And in the tomb, that requires us to really engage in our imagination. How can I reach out in this experience when I'm isolated, when I'm alone, when I'm here in my house? How are you doing that? How am I doing that? Because that is where the resurrection will occur. That is where this moment will be resurrected into the possibility that it is. And so I'm inviting you today to think about that. Here we are in this universal tomb. All of humanity here, isolated. Perhaps you're even alone in your home, except that God is in the experience with you, inspiring you, encouraging you. There are divine ideas coming to you so that, like Rita, you might receive a divine idea to start sewing masks or to simply make some phone calls, to reach out to a neighbor, to let them know that they're not alone, to reach out to your loved ones that you haven't spoken with in a long time. How can you reach out and be that love, that life, that light of Christ that is here present within you in the tomb, raising you up, resurrecting you? This is what we have an opportunity to experience, not only this week, but always. Richard Rohr ends, I'm going to find this quote that I wanted to end with today in this journey. He says, "Our full Christ option, and it is indeed a free choice to jump on board, offers us much that is both good and new. A God who is in total solidarity with all of us at every stage of the journey, and who will get us all to our destination together in love." This is where we are at this stage in the journey, not because God decided we needed to be punished, but because viruses do what viruses do. What are we going to do with ourselves? How are we going to show up in it? How are we going to resurrect? How are we going to allow God to move us in, through, and as us? That is our question. So, practice. Even alone, you get to practice. I get to practice. Lots of opportunities. So let's see what our practice is for the day. See if I can bring that up. Here we go. So our topic today was that I am in this with you. God is in this with you. Christ is in this with you. All that you need is in this with you. So take time throughout this week to contemplate that, to meditate upon that. I'm not alone. God is here with me. Right here, right now. That can never change. That can never be different. Throughout my day, I'm going to pause and consider in whatever I am experiencing that I am not alone. God is here with me in this. And as you do so, ask what it would be like. What would it be like to live in that understanding that I am not alone in this moment? And as your wisdom guides you to follow those ideas that come. And if we as spiritual community can support you in those divine ideas being realized, reach out. Let me know. That's what Denise did when she got the divine idea to be that one who's collecting food. That's what Rita did when she said, hey, I want to put this challenge out to Unity Spiritual Center. What are you hearing? What are you listening to? How is God inviting you to express and be that divine Christ self that you are? Let's do this together. I wanted to end with this beautiful Rumi poem. I saw this come through today, and I thought it so speaks to us. It's called Reflect. It's not by Rumi, I apologize. It's by Hafiz. My eyes so soft. Don't surrender your loneliness so quickly. Let it cut more deep. Let it ferment and season you, as few humans or even divine ingredients can. Something missing in my heart tonight has made my eyes so soft, my voice so tender, my need of God so absolutely clear. Let's take those words in. Let's not surrender this moment so quickly, so easily. Let's not rush ourselves through. Let's be with it. Let it change us, transform us in depth. That's what the resurrection experience is about. So thank you. Thank you for joining me for this message today. Thank you for your continued support of Unity Spiritual Center Westlake as we move into this next time of generosity, of sharing and offering together. I wanted to share with you that Unity Spiritual Center is strong. We are well grounded, and that is in large part because so many of you have been responding in such generous ways, supporting our community. And so I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for the solid ground that we are on, and know that as we all continue to do our part, Unity Spiritual Center will also come out the other side of this strong and thriving. So to remind you, we have many ways that you can support Unity Spiritual Center in Westlake. We're trying to make it easy for you. So you can, right on our website, there is a donate button. Many of you last week did that. You clicked through and shared a donation with us from that website. Facebook, we're starting a Facebook fundraiser each week. And so our first fundraiser was support for our salaries of our staff. Last week's fundraiser was to support the payment of our mortgage. This week's fundraiser is to support our utilities so that we will still have the lights on when all of this is through. So if you'd like to participate in Facebook, that's a way that you can do it. Right here with this Facebook live feed, there should be a donate button, or on our Facebook page, there's also a donate button. So you can choose any of those ways to donate on Facebook and know that it is all helping. You can, of course, also text to give. So by texting 84321, you can put in your dollar amount. The first time that you do that, it will be a little bit of a process to get that set up, but I've got that set up on my phone, and it's so easy to do. 84321, and I send in my donation. And finally, of course, many of you have chosen to mail in a check. That is also appreciation as well for Greg Scudderin, our trustee board president, who continues to go into Unity Spiritual Center and pick up the mail for us and get those checks where they need to be. So thank you. Thank you for the many ways that each of you are finding to support and contribute to Unity Spiritual Center Westlake. And so however you're choosing to contribute today, I'm just inviting you right here, right now, to just hold that in your heart and to join me in our affirmation. All that can be in divine abundance. All that can be in divine